Over the last 15 years, the Wildcats Research and Conservation Center has gathered hundreds of detections of 4 jaguars in the Sky Islands mountain regions.
In November 2025, a hidden camera deep in the mountains of southern Arizona captured an animal almost nobody expected to see, a wild jaguar. Just a few months later, the same cat came back. This time, he stood calmly beside a remote desert watering hole for nearly 5 minutes, as if he had lived there his entire life. But here's the strange part. The US government spent decades trying to wipe out jaguars, using hunting dogs, poisoned carcasses, and millions of dollars in bounties. By the 1960s, almost everyone believed the American jaguar was gone forever. Yet between 2009 and 2026, remote trail cameras captured 5 different male jaguars walking calmly through the high deserts of the Southwest. So what really happened to America's biggest cat? Why is it suddenly coming back? And most importantly, can America still become home to jaguars, or has that door already closed? But before we answer any of those questions, let's start with one fact that most Americans don't know about jaguars. The truth about jaguars. Right now, most Americans don't know one simple truth about jaguars. Ask someone where they belong, and you'll probably hear the Amazon, Brazil, maybe the thick rainforests of Central America. Very few people would ever say Arizona. But that's exactly where the story begins. Because the truth is, the American Southwest wasn't just a place jaguars passed through. It was their home. For centuries, they lived here, hunted here, and raised families here. Their range stretched across southern Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. On rare occasions, it even reached the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And this isn't just a story. The evidence is surprisingly well documented. The Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History and the American Museum of Natural History still preserve jaguar skulls, pelts, and skeletal remains collected from Arizona and New Mexico more than a century ago. At the same time, old government records and frontier newspapers tell the same story. One record from 1932 describes a large jaguar shot near Grand Canyon Village. To this day, this remains the northernmost confirmed sighting of a modern jaguar in the United States. Even California wasn't completely outside their world. One of the oldest historical records preserved by the California Academy of Sciences dates back to 1855. It documents a jaguar killed near Palm Springs in the San Jacinto Mountains, proving these cats could move through harsh desert landscapes as long as there was water and enough prey. But perhaps the strongest piece of evidence came from an old government wildlife report. In the early 1900s, it described a female jaguar raising 2 cubs near Flagstaff, Arizona, at nearly 7,000 feet above sea level. That detail matters more than it seems. A lone male can wander hundreds of miles looking for new territory. Cubs can't. If there were cubs, it means a female had settled there long enough to give birth and raise them. That surprises many people because we've been taught to picture jaguars as jungle animals. But the truth is, they're far more adaptable than that. They can live in rocky mountains, dry deserts, and scrubland. And maybe that's the reason why the story doesn't end with a few random sightings. In 2022, when Dr. Melanie Culver and her colleagues at the University of Arizona's Wildcat Research and Conservation Center brought together museum collections and modern field research, the picture became impossible to ignore. They confirmed more than 80 verified jaguar records, including more than 60 sightings, captures, and kills during the 20th century alone. Now, with all that evidence, the debate should already be over. But there's one final piece of this story that puts everything else into perspective. The name jaguar comes from the indigenous Tupi-Guarani word meaning "he who kills with one leap," a reference to the cat's incredible hunting style. And for native nations like the Tohono O'odham, whose ancestral lands stretch across southern Arizona and northern Mexico, the jaguar was never a foreign animal. It had always been part of their oldest stories, long before modern borders existed. And that raises the biggest question of all. How did an animal with such a long history almost disappear from America's memory? The war against predators. The jaguar didn't disappear because it couldn't survive in America. It disappeared because America decided it shouldn't. In the early 1900s, the country's attitude toward predators was completely different from today. They were seen as obstacles, dangerous animals standing in the way of ranches, farms, and westward expansion. The belief was simple. A safer, more profitable West meant getting rid of every large predator that threatened livestock. Then, in 1915, that belief became official government policy. The U.S. Bureau of Biological Survey created a special branch called Predator and Rodent Control. Its full-time hunters and trappers were paid with public money to wipe out large carnivores across the American West. This wasn't a few local hunters protecting cattle. It was a nationwide campaign. And they had brutal ways of doing it. Agents poisoned dead cattle, and later with Compound 1080. A single poisoned carcass didn't just kill the jaguar they were targeting. When poison didn't work, trained scent hounds were released. Jaguars are incredibly powerful, but they can't outrun a pack of dogs for long. Exhausted, they usually climbed a tree or backed into a rocky cave where hunters could shoot them with ease. The jaguar wasn't even the main target. As those predators disappeared, the entire ecosystem began to change. Then came the moment that changed everything. On September 22, 1963, a hunter named Terry Penrod was chasing what he believed was a large mountain lion through Arizona's Apache National Forest. His dogs forced the animal up a tree. Only after pulling the trigger did he realize what he had killed. It was the last confirmed female jaguar ever recorded in the United States. And without females, a species doesn't simply decline. It stops having a future. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. The impossible sightings. For more than 30 years, America believed its jaguars were gone forever. Then, on March 7, 1996, one man saw something that wasn't supposed to exist. Veteran mountain lion guide and rancher Warner Glenn was tracking a mountain lion with his pack of hounds through the rugged Pelonchillo Mountains along the Arizona-New Mexico border. When the dogs cornered the animal on top of a steep, rocky bluff, Glenn climbed up, expecting to find a mountain lion. Instead, he came face to face with a white jaguar. He had every reason to reach for his rifle. Instead, he reached for his camera. The photographs he took that day became the first definitive photographic proof of a living wild jaguar in the United States during the 20th century. A single roll of film had just challenged decades of scientific thinking. At first, many believed it was nothing more than a lone survivor, one animal wandering far from home. Then, just 5 months later, it happened again. In August 1996, another mountain lion hunter, Jack Childs, photographed a completely different male jaguar in Arizona's Babacomari Mountains. Suddenly, Warner Glenn's jaguar no longer looked like a miracle. It looked like the beginning of a pattern. That second cat would become famous. Researchers named him Macho B, and over the next 13 years, motion-activated trail cameras followed him across the desert mountains of southern Arizona. He became the longest-studied wild jaguar in modern American history, quietly moving through canyons where most people never imagined a jaguar could survive. Then, in 2009, everything changed. Wildlife biologists captured Macho B, fitted him with a satellite tracking collar, and released him back into the wild. But just a few days later, the collar showed something was wrong. He was barely moving. When veterinarians examined him at the Phoenix Zoo, they found his kidneys were failing, and there was no way to save him. So, on March 2nd, 2009, Macho B was euthanized, meaning they had to end his life to prevent any further suffering. Everyone thought that was the end of the story. But after a few months, a federal investigation uncovered something no one expected. The capture wasn't completely accidental. A field biologist later admitted he had placed female jaguar scent near the trap to attract Macho B, even though he didn't have permission to do it. He later pleaded guilty in federal court. But the hardest part was the irony of it all. The most famous jaguar in modern American history lost his life during a project that was supposed to help protect endangered wildlife. Now, after that painful incident, many thought Macho B would be the last chapter. Instead, more jaguars kept appearing. In 2011, a new male jaguar appeared in the Santa Rita Mountains, just 25 miles from downtown Tucson. Local school children gave him the name El Jefe, which means the boss. For more than 4 years, cameras captured him moving through the mountains before he eventually crossed back into Mexico. Then, in 2016, another male jaguar appeared in the nearby Huachuca Mountains. Researchers named him Sombra, meaning shadow. Like the cats before him, he appeared on trail cameras from time to time, then disappeared again. Researchers soon realized they weren't looking at the same animal. Every jaguar has a unique pattern of rosettes, the black spots on its coat, almost like a fingerprint. By comparing these markings, scientists could tell that each one was a different jaguar. And that could only mean one thing. These jaguars weren't getting lost. They were following a path most people never knew existed: the invisible highways. Researchers wanted to know one thing: why were these jaguars choosing the same places again and again? To find the answer, Dr. Melanie Culver and her team at the University of Arizona began digging through history. They didn't rely on stories or rumors. They gathered museum specimens, government records. In total, they mapped more than 80 verified jaguar records covering over 160 years. The result was remarkable. The jaguars appearing today weren't wandering into random places. They were walking through the very same mountain ranges where jaguars had been recorded more than a century earlier. Then another team began adding even more pieces to the puzzle. For over 15 years, researcher Susan Malusa and more than 40 trained volunteers hiked deep into the mountains to check remote trail cameras. But every now and then, a jaguar appeared. Their work confirmed 8 different jaguars in the United States over the last 3 decades. Even more surprising, 5 of them appeared within just the last 15 years. That wasn't just luck anymore. It was becoming a clear pattern. But still, the question was, where were they coming from? The answer lay just across the border. About 100 miles south, in the Mexican state of Sonora, lives the closest breeding population of wild jaguars. To understand them, Mexico carried out one of the largest wildlife surveys ever attempted. Nearly 50 researchers placed more than 900 camera traps across 15 states, and those cameras revealed something fascinating. Young male jaguars weren't wandering blindly. They were following long chains of connected mountains, often called sky islands, where they could find shade, water, and prey, while staying hidden from people. The route had never disappeared. It had simply been waiting for jaguars to use it again. And that raised an even bigger question. If these natural highways were still open, Could America still become a home for jaguars once again? Can America hold jaguars? According to ecological studies, the answer to this question is yes, and not by a small margin. Researchers have identified more than 20 million acres of suitable jaguar habitat across Arizona and New Mexico, an area about the size of South Carolina. Most of it is rugged public land filled with mountains, canyons, and the prey jaguars need, including deer and javelinas. Based on those conditions, biologists estimate the region could eventually support 90 to 150 wild jaguars. That may not sound like much, but it would be enough to create a real breeding population. Worldwide, only about 173,000 jaguars remain across 19 countries, and most of them live in the Amazon rainforest. Animals living on the edge of their range often develop unique traits that help them survive harsher conditions. Protecting this population could help protect the future of the species itself. And that's exactly where a bold proposal came in. In December 2022, the Center for Biological Diversity submitted a 107-page petition asking the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to actively reintroduce jaguars into New Mexico's Gila National Forest, instead of waiting for males to cross the border one by one. And they already had proof it could work. In Argentina's Ibarra wetlands, jaguars had disappeared for about 70 years. Through a carefully managed breeding and release program, conservationists brought them back. Today, dozens of wild jaguars once again roam an ecosystem where they had completely vanished. Supporters believed America could do the same. And bringing jaguars back wouldn't just save one species. As apex predators, they help keep entire ecosystems healthy by controlling prey populations. They can even hunt invasive feral hogs, an animal that causes billions of dollars in damage across the United States every year. The science seemed to support the idea. But the science isn't the only thing deciding the jaguar's future. Because in January 2024, the moment many conservationists had been waiting for finally arrived. And it wasn't the answer they hoped for. The door closing again. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service officially rejected the Center for Biological Diversity's proposal to reintroduce jaguars into New Mexico's Gila National Forest. The agency argued that jaguars reproduce slowly, raise only a few cubs, and would need too much human help to establish a new population. At the same time, New Mexico wildlife officials questioned whether the Gila region had ever supported a permanent breeding population in the first place. Instead of expanding protection, the government kept the jaguar's officially protected habitat limited to about 1,200 square miles, covering parts of just 3 Arizona counties. Then another problem grew even bigger: the border wall. For thousands of years, jaguars had crossed between what is now Mexico and the United States without ever knowing a border existed. Now, in many places, a 30-foot steel wall stood directly across those ancient routes. Scientists warned that it could cut off the only natural path young jaguars use to reach the United States. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. A jaguar can swim across rivers, climb steep cliffs, and travel hundreds of miles through some of the toughest country on Earth. But it can't walk through solid steel. Not everyone opposed jaguars for the same reason, though. Many ranchers feared they would lose cattle if the cats returned. But studies from Sonora, Mexico, where ranchers and jaguars have lived side by side for years, tell a different story. Researchers found that less than 2% of cattle losses were caused by jaguars. In fact, drought, disease, and other predators killed far more livestock. And that raises an obvious question. If jaguars belong here and the science supports their return, why is it still so controversial? The answer is simple. The fight is no longer just about jaguars. It's about politics, borders, and competing interests. But while people argue over what should happen next, one thing hasn't changed. The jaguars are still coming, and they're running into a serious problem that almost no one is talking about. Home, but alone. The cameras are still recording jaguars, but they all share one heartbreaking detail. Every single jaguar confirmed in the American Southwest over the last 3 decades has been a male. At first, that may not sound important, but in the world of jaguars, it changes everything. Young males naturally travel long distances to find new territory. Females usually don't. They stay much closer to where they were born and rarely cross major barriers like highways, cities, or border walls. That's why wildlife biologists say a few wandering males don't make a population. A population begins only when females settle, raise cubs, and those cubs survive to have families of their own. That means 100 males can walk into Arizona, and there still won't be a future. Without a female, there are no cubs. Without cubs, there is no next generation. And without a next generation, there is no true return. So here we are. After everything humans did to jaguars over the last century, they somehow found their way back. They crossed mountains, deserts, and borders to return to a place that had once been their home. Now the question is no longer whether they belong here. It's whether they'll ever get the chance to stay. Do you think America should actively help bring jaguars back by reintroducing breeding females? Or should nature be left to decide, even if that means jaguars may never return as a permanent population? Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss more true wildlife stories and documentaries like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.